The new podcast, In the Shadow of Princeton, starts as the matriarch of a prominent Princeton family is found stabbed to death in her locked basement. Investigators look from a serial attacker to her family to Princeton University students. One hot-blooded investigator sees a conspiracy. Is he way off base, or does privilege let you get away with murder? In the Shadow of Princeton is available wherever you get podcasts, or you can binge it ad-free by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
It's the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. Welcome to episode 9 of the Jersey Blitz. I'm Dan Long, and I'll be joined alongside by Luis Torres, Ryan Patti, and Mike Kinney to break down all of the brackets in North 1 and North 2 as we're getting you set for the start of the public school playoffs here in the Garden State. And we'll kick it off by looking at the North 1 Group 5 bracket. And Ryan, Patti, is Ridgewood the clear favorite here, or is this bracket wide open despite the Maroons being the top seed?
To me, Ridgewood's still the team to beat here, but it's by the thinnest of margins because they've kind of tapered off a bit from their hot start to the season. They did beat third seed Piscataway earlier this year, and they have a good win over Ramapo that looks more impressive by the day. But I didn't expect them to lose to Northern Highlands and Wayne Valley by multiple scores at that. There are a couple teams that could trip them up in this bracket, and I think it's got to start with Passaic, believe it or not. They have one of the best running backs in the state in Justin Griffin. He's got over 1,500 yards. And if they get by them, they have the likes of East Orange or Montclair, and both teams have terrific coaching staffs, and they're both very, very experienced there. So on the other side of the bracket, West Orange is without Charlie Lamort for the rest of the year, but I think they're a tough out regardless, and they're playing a very battle-tested Linden team, and I'm sure Piscataway would love another crack at Ridgewood, but Bayonne's won 6 in a row, and I'm sure they have something to say as well. So nothing in this section would surprise me. It's wide open, and I can't wait to hear what Mike has to say about some of his teams.
Well, you've been name-dropped, Mike Kinney. Who do you think gives Ridgewood maybe the best shot at coming out of this bracket as the sectional champion in North 1 Group 5?
Yeah, I think it's still West Orange, the number 2 seed. I mean, it's a shame that Charlie Lamort is out. He was having such a great season for West Orange. At the same time, Brandon LaBanca, he stepped in at quarterback. He had a little bit of experience earlier in this season. He stepped in last game against Bloomfield, didn't miss a pass. He was 8 of 8. Bloomfield is not a team, they're going to see the likes of teams much better than Bloomfield here, obviously. But there's other pieces of that West Orange puzzle that can come and play. And the key for them, I think, with Lamort out will be how well they run the ball. It's not been their premier aspect of their game. But Farad Green and Chris Barino, if they get going in the running game, then West Orange is going to be very difficult because I do believe that LaBanca is going to do a good job at quarterback for West Orange. So how they do with their running game is going to be imperative for them. I like their defense coming in here. So I think West Orange is a tough team, and I think Piscataway is a tough team. They showed that against Ridgewood when they went to Ridgewood last month and lost a close game. Another time against them, I think I don't dislike Piscataway's chances against them. They've got so many athletes: Jahai Johnson, James Bodley, running the ball, catching the ball. They're so dangerous because of their ability to return interceptions and fumble recoveries and to possess in their drives. So that's Piscataway's dangerous too, and I don't discount East Orange either. East Orange is also a team that's playing very well right now. Saeed Cole doing a really good job at quarterback. They're playing their best football right now. That's a danger.
North 2 Group 5 bracket. That has Union City as the top seed, Passaic Tech as the number 3 seed. Does that mean, Ryan, that we're on a collision course once again to have Union City take on Passaic Tech for a sectional championship?
We might be, Dan. And I could talk about how good this Union City team is for a long time, but Wilbur Valdez, he's been at Union City for a long time. He's had some really good teams. He's got over 100 wins, but this may be his best team because they do everything well. They have 20 takeaways. They return punts and kicks for touchdowns. They have a ton of pass rushers who can get after the quarterback and stop the run against the run game. And they have a ton of ball carriers who could score from anywhere out of their wing tee, but now they could also throw the ball. And I've been told by members of their staff about Xavier Rodriguez for a long time now, and the hype is real. He has a low completion percentage because, the passes he's throwing are deep downfield, but he completes a lot of them because Khalil Sutton, Kareem Hector, Kingston Evans, these guys can all go up and get the ball. And that's a huge element in the game because Passaic Tech over the years against Union City has always had an answer for that wing T, and they've done it just about every time they've matched up. So both teams have to get there first. I think I'm going to pick the matchup to happen, but I know Mike is very high on Elizabeth and Bridgewater-Raritan and Plainfield and, a couple of other these teams to put up a good fight against Union City and Passaic Tech.
Mike, as Ryan just was saying, can Elizabeth, Bridgewater-Raritan, can another team go deep in this bracket here in North 2 Group 5?
The way things are going right now, Dan, I think Elizabeth has the best chance. And the reason being, they've had so much chaos over there, coaching-wise. If anyone remembers, John Fiore was fired going into the third game of the season. They began at 2-0. Then they had an interim coach for a week, and now they have Eugene Klein the last couple of weeks. Eugene Klein was the offensive coordinator for John Fiore. So the last few weeks, there's been a little more order restored in Elizabeth, and they're showing, I think, what people expected from them earlier in the season. They lost a few games during all the craziness, but they've won 3 in a row now, and they're playing very good football. I tell you, Arik Fleming is only a sophomore, but he is really a rising star, not only in the conference, but I think in the state as a quarterback. He's a kid with arm strength. He's a kid who can run with the football. And he's a kid who throws with unbelievable accuracy. So he's playing extremely well. He has a very dangerous receiver in Najee Smith and another one in Kaishawn D. Carteret. And if they can get their running game going, now Fleming runs the ball well, but if Joseph Desire can also run the ball, if they can establish that run, they're going to be so dangerous in the pass. And I believe that they're a team, I don't know if they can beat Union City, but with the parts they have, they could give Union City a game. Surprise teams out of here, of the teams I cover, Bridgewater-Raritan's a little too unpredictable. I don't know if they can be a team that can finish over a source of a couple games. They've lost 3 in a row. Sometimes they play well. They've not been playing terribly well lately. So I don't know if they're a team that can get to the finish line. Dangerous team here is Plainfield, another team out of Union County like Elizabeth is. They're playing extremely well. Kamal Lowry has really settled in as the quarterback. He's a junior. And defensively, they're really tough because they put pressure on the line of scrimmage with Alameen Watkins and Jaquan Anderson, and their secondary is outstanding. Joel Cordoba and E.J. Brown lead that group. So defensively, they can take the ball away from you, and they can get the ball back to their offense. And Kamal Lowry is doing an excellent job at quarterback lately. They're a dangerous dark horse team. But I'll tell you what, I kind of agree with Ryan here. I think Union City is a little bit above everybody else. They play on the roof, and right now they might be a couple stories ahead of everybody else in this section.
Now we shift gears to one of the fun parts of our playoff preview, and that's something that we've been hinting about for the last couple of weeks, what the playoffs are going to be like up in the North in Group 4. Starting off with North 1 Group 4, and we bring in Luis Torres for the first time here in the Jersey Blitz. Luis, could the story in this North 1 Group 4 section be about the potential chalky sectional semifinal matchups? It is just a loaded field of who's in North 1 Group 4.
Yeah, a lot of good teams. And I think there's not a lot of sections where you can see, all right, it's going to be pretty much chalk all the way through, especially in the first round and the quarterfinals here. But I think the higher seeds or the lower seeds, however you want to put it, are kind of overwhelming favorites and kind of in all 4 of these matchups. I mean, you look at top seed of Morris Knolls are taking on Colonia. Colonia's got to worry about that spread option, that triple option offense that Knolls it's been running at a running really well under Brian Gallagher, as I've mentioned in weeks past. And then you look at Mount Olive, it's going to be taking on Newark Central. And Mount Olive I've kind of said this to kind of the guys and kind of everybody. I think they're the most talented public school team in Morris County, and the regular season kind of hasn't played out the way they kind of wanted to, kind of there and losing 3 games, but they have a lot of guys back that ended up winning a sectional title. So I think we could be on a all Morris County collision course there in the top half of the bracket. And then you look at the bottom half of the bracket. I mean, you have Ramapo's playing really well. That's going to be a tough matchup for Randolph. And then you have Ridge taking on Rahway. I know that's kind of more Mike Kinney's area in terms of both of those teams, but I mean, Ridge has been playing fantastic all season long, and they're now inside the top 12 of our rankings. And even though they're the second seed in this bracket, they could probably be considered the favorites, just slightly above a Morris Knolls or even a Mount Olive and Randolph, just because of the season they've kind of had this year. So I think out of all the brackets so far that we've kind of spoken about, I mean, this is definitely the one that has the potential to be the most chalky.
Ryan, I had the opportunity to cover an exciting game last Friday in Franklin Lakes. Ramapo came from behind in triple overtime to defeat Northern Highlands. What should we expect from Ramapo at the start of this postseason in the quarterfinals?
Yeah, I mean, Ramapo is on a tear, Dan. They've won 5 in a row since their 0-3 start. It was their first 0-3 start for the program since 2007, and it must have lit a fire under them for sure. But more importantly, I think they kind of just needed a little more time to adjust. They have a new coach, new scheme, new players, and new pretty much everything. So it just took some time for everyone to get adjusted, and now they're firing on all cylinders. And if they get past Randolph, I'm pretty intrigued by a matchup against Ridge, because they seem to be one of the state's smoothest operations right now. And we know how highly Luis thinks of Mount Olive and Morris Knolls. There's so much to look forward to with this section, because even if we get some quarterfinal upsets, I think that makes some of the storylines even more appetizing. But this Ramapo team is on fire right now, and no one's safe against them or in this section.
Mike, Ridge is that number 2 seed in North 1 Group 4, and they've got an interesting matchup in your mind in that first game in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, they sure do. Rahway is a dangerous team. They're a very young team, Rahway. So I think going into the season, not a lot of people expected a whole lot of them. They're loaded with sophomores and juniors. Andrew Avent is an outstanding running back and linebacker for Rahway, and he's the star of the team, but he's only a junior. So he came in coming off a really strong sophomore year. But other than that, Rahway is a really young team. Jaquan Robinson is their sophomore quarterback, and Jolene Eastman is a sophomore two-way lineman for them. Amir Beerfield is one of their older guys at defensive lineman, and he and Donia Fish sort of lead the group, the senior statesmen on the line, and really help the Rahway team. But skill-wise, they're really young, so they're a team that's dangerous, I think, because they're playing so loose. They're kind of playing, they go in, they're sort of playing with house money in that sense. And they've got talent. So if they get a lead in a game, they're going to be a tough team to handle. Now, Ridge is a team that has been kind of running away from almost everyone this year. They had a huge win against, other than St. Joe's, but they lost there earlier in the season. They had a huge win, third game of the season against Phillipsburg, where they really showed their ability to control the football. But here's the rub for Ridge. Their running game is so strong with Aiden Stieglitz and Ryan Turner, but Ryan Turner has not played the last 2 weeks. He's been injured. Spoke with Andy West, the head coach, and he said it's a day-by-day thing with Ryan. He may be back for this game against Rahway. If he's not, that puts a lot of pressure on Aiden Stieglitz to get the job done in the ground game, not by himself, but certainly he'd be the focus where they in that wing T that they run. He can't be the focus if you're playing defense, because Turner's going to kill you, and Connor McLachlan, the quarterback, can hurt you in the run game. They can hurt you with the dive with the fullback and then get you outside, get you counter. But without Ryan Turner, it's a different story in the run game. So that would give Rahway, I think, an advantage defensively. If he's back, Ridge will be the team it has been over the last month and a half, which is just dynamite. They do so many things offensively that hurt you. They control the clock, and defensively they can get the ball back. So I'm seeing that way down the road as possibly an outstanding game against Morris Knolls in a conference final, but we're not going to get there that far. So, Rahway has a chance here against Ridge, especially if Ryan Turner doesn't play.
North 2 Group 4, to get a look at all these matchups, I will be at Northern Highlands on Friday night for NJ.com Friday Night Football Game of the Week, as Northern Highlands is going to be playing host to Westfield in a really entertaining matchup. I'm going to go around to each one of you three, starting off with Luis Torres. What are some of the favorite matchups that you see coming out of this bracket right now, again, in North 2 Group 4?
I'll touch on one that I'm actually going to be at on Friday night. I'm going to go to Chatham, Wayne Valley in Wayne. It's a 5-4 matchup here in this section. I mean, in this bracket. It's an interesting game to me because both these offenses are pretty good. I mean, Chatham is able to throw the ball, and so is Wayne Valley, and they both have a common opponent. Both these teams kind of played Mount Olive at some point this season. Chatham actually pulled off one of the stunners of the year when they beat Mount Olive by 25. That kind of caught, I think, a lot of people's eyes. And then Wayne Valley beat Mount Olive a couple weeks ago by 1. So there's a common opponent there, and it's a good matchup. I'm curious to see kind of how both of those defenses are going to be able to play against and match up against the opposing offenses, because I think there's a chance that game could be pretty high scoring, and it could come down to whichever defense plays well and is able to get stops and get forced third and long. So that's the game that kind of is intriguing to me, and it's the one I'm looking forward to most, kind of this in the first round here in this bracket.
Ryan, Patti, what is the juiciest matchup in your minds here in the quarterfinal round in North 2 Group 4?
Dan, I'm going to be joining you at Northern Highlands for that showdown against Westfield, and both of these teams are 4-4 and maybe a step below where they were last year. But I don't think that means much, because last year they were threats to win their section, and both programs kind of come into this season feeling pretty good about where they're at, even with the injuries to Northern Highlands. But Mike saw Westfield put on a show against Elizabeth earlier this year, and they're a little banged up. But I got to see a lot of what their kids could do when they beat up Clifton last year in the first round of the playoffs. And I've only seen Northern Highlands in person once this year, and that was their season opener against Washington Township at the Battle at the Beach. But this Highlands team believes in itself. I mean, their losses are to Township, Union City, Oltapan, and Ramapo, and those are 4 solid teams. And they're the only team that's beat Pascack Valley. Granted, that was with Nate Johnson and Matt Boydell, those aforementioned injuries that I mentioned, but they were lost for the season in that game, and I feel like they've kind of rallied around those injuries. I mean, they're devastating injuries, but it kind of made the team a little stronger and a little closer, because they got to lean on each other here, and they're kind of like the Rocky Balboa of this section, and I'm expecting them to play very feisty in this game, and I'm a big fan of a lot of those kids on that roster. Same with Westfield.
And Mike, what's the matchup that you're looking forward to the most? And also the second question, based on how the bracket is shaken out, do you think it's an easier road for Phillipsburg to get to a sectional final based on all the who's who that are in the bottom part of this North 2 Group 4 bracket?
Hey, Dan, yeah, a little bit there. I don't know if Nutley can keep up with Phillipsburg at all in that first round. So Phillipsburg at home in that first round game, I like Phillipsburg. I think in a big win there, I think they'll be able to rest some starters. That's going to help them for the following week. There's no doubt about that. One game I would say, I tell you what, Watchung Hills has had a hard time the last couple of weeks, but if I'm Woodbridge, I'm not going to overlook them. They've got some danger. Watchung Hills has some danger. Woodbridge cannot look at Watchung Hills' 5-4 record and say, "Oh, we got these guys. We're undefeated. We've been playing great." Because I saw Woodbridge several weeks ago against a Colonia team that's under 500 now, and they almost lost that game. They're playing great, but they cannot look ahead to the semifinal round. They've got to take care of business there. I've got to agree with Ryan, though. That Westfield Northern Highlands game is a very interesting game. Both teams have had to deal with injuries. Northern Highlands, though, is really showing how well it's coached and how tough those kids are by the way they've persevered the last couple of weeks with key injuries. Westfield's had to deal with injuries too. Cole Wiedler at quarterback was banged up a little bit, and Enzo Ferreira, who I really believe is one of the top receivers in the conference, no doubt, and I think in the state as well, was hurt in that Elizabeth game that Ryan spoke of, and he's not been back, and that's tough. But at the same time, Westfield has shown, first of all, Jordan Walsh's ability to step in and play some quarterback, and Matt Anzel has been using both he and Cole Wiedler the last couple of weeks as sort of dueling quarterbacks. But Sebastian McGarry and Colin Coyle have shown that, well, if Enzo Ferreira had been in the lineup, what a great receiving core they would have had, because those two guys are carrying the load, and Westfield's playing pretty good football right now. They just came off a tough loss against Ridge, which is an awesome team. So I think that's a great game. And Matt Anzel in his first season is kind of showing his coaching chops for Westfield. He's going against a tough guy up in Northern Highlands because they are so well coached. But that's an interesting game. This section has interesting games all over it, though.
Looking now, starting at Group 3 with North 1 Group 3, Ryan and Luis, we have some interesting, fun matchups in the first round, but getting right to it. Is this headed for a Pascack Valley Mendham collision course in the sectional final?
I think we are on that collision course between PV and Mendham, kind of meeting in that sectional final. I think Mendham has potential. I mean, they got to get past Riverdale first, and Mendham's offense is kind of hard to prepare for. They run that triple option extremely well. I still think they lead the state in rushing, close to 3,200 yards. Now they're going to end up having two 1,000-yard rushers in Kevin King and Cole Capuzzi. But a potential semifinal matchup is looming between them and Passaic Valley. I think Ryan has been pretty high in Passaic Valley all year. But I think Mendham is just the way they've been playing this year's kind of been a special season for them. I mean, they beat Randolph last week for the first time in school history. And I touched on it during last week's episode that they won the first division title since I was in middle school. And they're 8-1 now. And it's been a great year for Ethan Jaros and those kids over there at Mendham, the kind of the season they've had. So I think they have a shot to kind of get to that sectional final. I think they will get to that sectional final. I also want to touch on kind of a quarterfinal match that I have my eye on is that Sparta-Montville game. And it's a rematch of a week 0 game. The first game I went to this season way back when now, in late August and early September. And those Sparta ended up, they had some new pieces kind of, especially on the offensive line, and Montville kind of handled them with Anthony Feaster, who's one of the better players in Morris County. Montville ended up winning that game 33-9. But since then, Sparta has railed off 7 wins in a row, ended up winning another division title there for Frank Marciano. And it's hard to beat a good team twice in a year. So that game actually got moved to Saturday afternoon. And I'm curious to see how Sparta's offensive line kind of deals with Montville's front seven and how many steps they've kind of taken since that week 0 game. So that's a quarterfinal match that I actually have my eye on as well.
And Ryan, same question. Do you feel like this is headed for a Pascack Valley Mendham collision course? And what are the other games that are catching your eye in this North 1 Group 3 bracket?
Well, one of the games that's catching my eye, Dan, is the Snyder against Passaic Valley game. And this game is basically DJ McClary, Keon Thorpe, and the rest of those amazing athletes for Snyder against the hard-nosed, rugged Hornets. And I have this to say about the Pascack Valley and Mendham theory. I do think it's going to be a collision course, and I have some crow to eat with my alma mater in Pascack Valley. I picked against them against Old Tappan, and they kind of did whatever they wanted in that game offensively. I mean, the ground game for them has just been so effective, and it's pretty much that pick your poison with Kevin Regula and Adam Shaw. And offensive coordinator Bill Weigel, he's done a tremendous job of getting Shaw into a rhythm from the get-go in those games with, completable passes and passes that he often just does complete. And once this offense gets going, it's kind of just an avalanche. I mean, they've executed their scheme in just about every game besides that Northern Highlands game. And I know how highly Luis thinks of Mendham and how difficult that offense is to defend, but it feels like every team from Morris County kind of just throws the kitchen sink at your defensive line. And that would be a fun matchup against Pascack Valley for Mendham, but we got to get there first, and I'm interested to see how this section plays out.
Well done there, Ryan, because now you get invited back to homecoming after eating crow there about your alma mater. We now shift gears to North 2 Group 3, and this is a section for all three of you where it is just full of rematches from last season and from this season as well, with so many different matchups on the horizon. We're going to start off with you, Mike Kinney. What are you looking at in North 2 Group 3 in this star-studded bracket?
Yeah, no doubt. This reminds me of Group 4 as far as how talented it is. I got to look at the Summit Cranford game in the quarterfinal round. This was a game earlier in the season. Summit won the game 21-7. This game could turn around the other way. There's no doubt about it. It's the way the season's been going for both teams. Summit right now is not playing its best football, and Cranford has been playing great football the last couple of weeks. They swarm to the football defensively, and offensively they're doing an outstanding job. Tyler Veltri, a quarterback, has really settled in. The running game is sounder than it had been at the beginning of the season when they played Summit. Summit kind of was able to control the ball because Cranford had some trouble establishing its ground game. But Gabe Worrell and Amari Petgrave are doing a great job there. And Veltri has an outstanding receiver, Luciano Fiorenza, to throw to. Summit has had the problem with Summit is that it's had injuries throughout the season. Began at the very beginning of the season when Henrique Riccardi, who was one of their top running backs coming back, got injured. And very lately, Alex Schwark has missed the last couple of games at running back. So their depth has really been challenged at the running back position. And Summit, that's what they want to do. Cole Sable can throw the ball, but it's not what Summit wants to do. Summit wants to control the football, move the chains. Cranford's been doing a better job of that, frankly, the last couple of weeks. So Cranford could reverse this and get some revenge on Summit here. They only scored the one touchdown a few weeks ago, but Cranford is playing very, very good football right now.
Ryan, what's the matchup that catches your eye here in this bracket that has Old Tappan as the top seed in North 2 Group 3?
I'm going to look all the way ahead to a potential sectional final, Dan, and that's NVOT against West Essex. And both of these teams are kind of licking their wounds after last week, and obviously nothing's a given here with how stacked this section is, but what a sectional final this would be. This was a great game in week 0 that saw Old Tappan go up 19-0 in the first quarter, but West Essex kind of never went away, and they end up losing the game 19-7. But we were introduced to Zach Maselli for the first time for Old Tappan in this game, and he actually threw one of his touchdown passes to Alex Orecchio, who he essentially stepped in for at quarterback this year. And Alex is pretty much doing everything now for Old Tappan. He's running the ball, he's running routes, he's playing linebacker, he's got a ton of interceptions at linebacker, and he's kicking field goals and PATs. And West Essex, meanwhile, has been tested a lot this year with a very tough schedule that they play. They got a very nice win over Hanover Park a couple weeks ago, and they look really good so far this year. But both of these teams have made a state final in the last 2 years, and I mean, what more can you want than two of these storied programs meeting in a sectional final, just a couple weeks away from Rutgers?
Luis, what's the matchup that catches your eye here in North 2 Group 3?
Again, it's kind of looking a little forward, but it would be in the semifinals. It'd be West Morris against West Essex for what feels like it would be the 13th time in the last few years. They've actually played 5 times in the last 3 years, and we're looking at a 6th matchup here. Of course, last year they met in the Group 3 semifinals that West Essex ended up winning after West Morris kind of took an early 2-touchdown lead, and West Essex was able to fight back and get to that Group 3 final. 2 years ago, they met twice, once in the regular season, and West Morris won 9-7 and ended up winning the sectional title. I think it was 21-6 ended up being that final. And the year before that, they met 2 times again. So they've basically become rivals. There's a respected rivalry between those two historic programs there. I mean, they could find themselves kind of one win away from meeting each other again with a chance to reach a sectional final once again.
Looking now at the Group 2 level, we look at North 1 Group 2. This is a bracket for the three of you that you could sink your teeth into as well. It's kind of a who's who of tradition-rich programs that have had success, sectional championships, statewide championships over the course of the last couple of seasons. Westwood, the top team in this bracket. Bernard's number 2. You have Caldwell as a team that had, as of last season, the longest win streak in New Jersey and a defending state champion from years ago as the number 4 seed. So starting off here with Ryan, Patti, what do you like about North 1 Group 2 and some of those matchups that might be coming together down the road in the bracket?
Dan, you mentioned Westwood and Bernard's, and I'm going to talk about another potential sectional final. I'm looking very far ahead here. We saw Westwood and Bernard's last year in the Group 2 semifinals, and we could see it again here in the sectional final in a couple weeks. And last year was kind of the size and strength of Bernard's up front against the skill position kids that Westwood had, and the Russell Wilson-like ability there of Robbie Karsich, who's now at Monmouth. But Westwood right now is playing some really good football. They're a very run-heavy team with Aiden Dugan and Steve Klein running the ball there. Both of those kids are also very good athletes on defense, and they return a lot of their offensive line. So the ground game is very, very effective, and Sean Morrison can run a bit at quarterback, and he's done a very good job for them. And Bernard's returns a lot of kids from last year. So that game would be very, very appetizing. And there's so much just to love about this section as a whole, like you mentioned. Westwood and Bernard's are by no means safe. I think they're playing the best football out of anyone in this section, but there's 8 really good teams in this section, and it's a shame that only one can leave it and continue their quest for Rutgers.
Luis Torres, this is a monster of a bracket, North 1 Group 2. Does Westwood have enough in the tank, or are there other matchups that you're really intrigued by and thinking that they could have what it takes to knock off the defending state champions in Group 2?
Ryan put it perfectly when he said nobody is safe in this bracket. I mean, you have, like you mentioned, 8 great teams. I mean, Lakeland went to a sectional final last year and lost to Bernard, and I know they haven't had the regular season they kind of wanted to, but Colin Sabrik is back. He's the all-time passing leader in that program, and they got a chance to kind of play against Westwood there in that opening game, and maybe they could pull off a shocker. I mean, Shabazz Caldwell, I mean, that's a rematch that I think Mike was at that first matchup. He's going to be there again on Friday. And then I'm looking at Pequannock Madison. That's a rematch of a game that happened 2 weeks ago. Madison beat Pequannock. They scored, I think it was 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, ended up beating Pequannock, and that game was at Madison. Now they flip over, and they'll play at Pequannock on Friday night, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what adjustments both of those teams kind of have made. Madison's been a little bit more multiple than they have been in the past. They used to be kind of just straight wing T, but they're throwing it a little bit more, and Pequannock is just a straight wing T team with a bunch of guys kind of playing really well. I mean, Eddie Shalongo, Angelo Cundiff, Justin Griskin, Dylan Romilly, those are kind of their main guys. And I'm curious to see kind of how that matchup happens, and kind of with just 2 weeks ago when they played. And then you have Rutherford. I mean, Rutherford went to 3 straight sectional finals and couldn't get over the hump against Westwood the last couple of years. And they're playing Bernards in the first round. But Rutherford has a shot. I mean, Chris Joya is going to be one of the top players in this section. He's got 24 touchdowns this year. He's kind of been used all over the place, kind of in the backfield and kind of in the slot for Rutherford and the Bulldogs. And I'm curious to see kind of how that one plays out. And Rutherford's young. I mean, they're starting 6 sophomores and 3 freshmen this year. They've got more experience as kind of the season has gone along. So it's going to be a tough matchup against Bernards, but nobody is safe in this section, like Ryan alluded to.
Mike Kinney, what's that matchup that you are looking forward to seeing in person here in North 1 Group 2?
Yeah, Dan, first of all, I know Bernards is having an unbelievably good season. They are playing such strong football right now, and pretty amazing considering the guys they lost from last year's great team. They've just been able to fill in positions so well, but they are not feeling comfortable about number 7 Rutherford, I can guarantee you. But Luis talked about this. There's no question about it. The Caldwell-Shabazz game in the first round, I'm really excited about that. I did see that first game. It was down in Newark, and Caldwell played textbook football, keep the ball away from Shabazz, keep the ball away from their great athletes, possess, move the chains. The unreal job they did in that game to win that game 21-7. However, Shabazz showed exactly what you'd fear from Shabazz. Their speed can be scintillating. Davion Porter, their one touchdown was a 95-yard kick return by Davion Porter. Thing about Shabazz is that they had a couple transfers who had to sit out a couple weeks. They were eligible for Caldwell, but just eligible. Things weren't gelled yet for Shabazz, and they also had a couple injuries. Right now, things are beginning to gel for them since that game only a couple weeks ago against Caldwell. The last few weeks, they played Kinnelon and Verona, and Verona's had some good wins this year. But Shabazz beat these two schools by a combined score of 105-0. Now, those are the 2 games that came off the Caldwell loss. So Caldwell could see a wholly different Shabazz team than they faced just a couple weeks ago. They've got to do the same thing. It's at Caldwell. They're feeling good about that. They love playing up at their home field. They've got to take the lead early like they did in the first game. They were up 7-0 at the half against Shabazz. They have to do that again. Nick McNune and Mike McNune, the McNune brothers, are doing a fantastic job running the ball and catching the ball. The thing about Caldwell that's amazing is that Adam Sepe is only a freshman. He stepped in at quarterback in the 3rd game of the season. He's done a remarkable job of running this offense. He wasn't rattled at all by Shabazz's defense, which is quick, which is hard hitting, gets in the backfield quick. He kept his poise. He read his progressions. He did a marvelous job, although he didn't throw the ball that much because that was not in the plans against Shabazz. If he needs to, I think he can, though, but you want to keep away from that Shabazz secondary. This could be a different Shabazz team than Caldwell faced a couple weeks ago. Nonetheless, it's a game I'm really looking forward to. Again, it's going to be a really solid game. Caldwell's such a well-coached team. We want to see what Todd Romano has in store for this. I got to think not going to be much different than the first time. Run them football.
And in taking a look at North 2 Group 2, Glen Rock is the top overall seed, but Luis, is Hanover Park now considered the new favorite after last week's game when Glen Rock lost in the NJIC title game?
I wouldn't put a ton of stock in Glen Rock's losing in the NJIC title game against Butler. I mean, Butler is one of the top Group 1 teams in the state and are probably considered the favorite in their section. We'll talk about Butler here coming up. But the job that Kyle McCord has done, I spoke to him earlier. He said that they've kind of flushed that loss and kind of regrouped and rebounded now to kind of get ready for the playoff run here. It's going to be interesting. They got a matchup against Waldwick, a team they played way back in week 1 and ended up winning 42-0. And Kyle McCord, the coach at Glenrock, said he expects it to be a more competitive game this time. That was a long time ago, and kind of we've touched on it a couple times this year. It's hard to beat a good team twice, and everybody who's in the playoffs is a good. You should consider a good team. So it's going to be a good matchup there between those two NGIC schools. I mean, Hanover Park's had a whale of a season. They bounced back. They lost to West Essex 2 weeks ago, who we touched on. It's always a powerhouse program there in Group 3, and Hanover Park kind of bounced back and got a win over Weequahic last week to kind of get ready here for the playoffs. And they got an interesting matchup against Newton, who runs the wing T and has some young players and some young pieces. And Hanover Park's not the biggest team in the world, but they have great sideline-to-sideline speed, and they kind of showcase that in a game I saw them now almost a month ago when they played Pequannock, and Pequannock is a wing T team as well. So I think Hanover Park, they've only won one sectional title in their school's history, and that was back in 1990. And they have a really good shot to kind of get to a sectional final here and get a chance to kind of break through. And one team I kind of want to touch on is High Point and kind of the job that Bill Percy's done there. He was actually their coach from, I think, 2010 to 2012 and kind of came back this year. And they're 8-1, and they're a program that's never made a sectional final. And their overall playoff record as a program is 4-6. But, I mean, they have a matchup against Beckton, and Beckton has to make that trek from East Rutherford all the way to the High Point. But High Point, I mean, this is a chance for them to make some history over the coming weeks, and they have the team to do it. Running back Jaron Martress has rushed for almost 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns this year. And he's also a really good defensive back linebacker, kind of in the box guy. I think he's also the leading tackler. And quarterback John Elko is a kind of a dual threat who's kind of combined to throw and run for 20 touchdowns this year. So High Point's a team that has a chance to kind of make some noise here over the coming weeks.
Ryan, what are the other storylines that you see in this North 2 Group 2 section?
Dan, I'm actually going to stop daydreaming about the sectional finals here for a second, and I'm going to talk about Lyndhurst at Ramsey on Friday. We make our picks every single week, and I have no idea who I'm going to pick for this game. I mean, both of these teams have a ton of upside on both sides of the ball. Justice Favada for Ramsey's playing great football under center in his junior season. He's got a ton of weapons at his disposal, and the defense has a lot of kids who can change a game on a single play. And for Lyndhurst, it's all about Sean Bellinger and Roddy Marino on offense. It's more of that pick your poison that I talked about with Pascack Valley. That's kind of what it is for Lyndhurst. And we see a lot of teams from across the state have that pick your poison. And it's kind of, are you going to game plan against the pass or the run? Like, what are you going to choose? And Lyndhurst is good at both. And they also have some nasty kids in the front seven. One of them is Marino at linebacker, but you also have Victor Kanjuk and Shadid Smith and Logan Sitzer. So there's a lot that makes this game fun.
So now we're in the home stretch. We're approaching Group 1 action. North 1, Group 1 to be exact. Is this going to be an NJIC heavy section with Butler running away with it, Ryan? And if so, what do they have to do to get that done in a lopsided fashion and bring home the sectional championship in North 1, Group 1?
Yeah, Dan, I saw Butler for the first time this season last week in the aforementioned NJIC final, and they look legit. I mean, they needed two big plays from PJ Coffey to get two of their touchdowns, which is a little concerning, but that's who PJ Coffey is. I mean, he can do that to you, and so can Mikey Henahan through the passing game. But I think this team might start to miss Matt Barilli a little bit at running back and linebacker, but I think they have the tools to establish a ground game with Yadi Perez. And, you know, they did some quarterback power with David Smith that I liked a lot, and it kind of worked well to start the second half there. But their defense was rock solid. They contained Nick Atmey and Matt Boytsitz in the ground game, and they knocked down more third down passes than I could count. I mean, their defense kind of just knows how to get off the field, and they're rock solid. But for me, it's about continuing to play that solid defense and maybe doing a little bit better of a job in the ground game and you know, clock control and ball control so they can dictate the game and kind of just do whatever they want and dictate everything.
Luis, Mountain Lakes is the number 3 seed in this bracket. They always seemingly find a way to get back to the state finals. Are they the team that's lurking that could be a problem for Butler down the road in this North 1 Group 1 bracket?
I think so. I mean, it's not the same Mountain Lakes team that's gone to the Group 1 final the last couple of years. Of course, they lost that game 2 years ago, and they ended up winning the Group 1 title and that win over Glassboro last year. And they graduated a lot of players from that team last year that kind of came back. It was a big senior class. And talking to Coach Daryl Fusco before the year started, he's like, potentially our 3 toughest games during the regular season are our first 3 games. And Mountain Lake started 0-3. And that's a rarity for a program like Mountain Lake's, kind of the history they had and the success they've had. But it kind of figured they would kind of get things going as they kind of, some of those new players and new pieces kind of assimilated and kind of gelled together. And look at here now. I mean, they have a good path to kind of getting back to a sectional final. I mean, fullback Carson Fitch is back and he's healthy. He missed a couple games early on in the season after he got dinged up in the game against Pequannock that I actually was at back in week 2. So he's one of their top players. He's going to be one of the top players in this section. And Mountain Lakes just runs their stuff so well. It's so crisp. Especially on offense because of that wing tee, because all those kids are kind of ingrained in running it. So they might not have the sides up front that they had the last couple of years, but they run their stuff so well, and it's hard to stop. And they got a rematch there against Lenape Valley, a team they beat a couple of weeks ago there in the first round. And after that, they get a potential they're going to get an NJIC team between Park Ridge and New Milford. But the path is there for Mountain Lakes. They've been lurking for the last couple of weeks, and here they are now again with a shot to get to a sectional final.
And last but certainly not least, we take a look at the North 2 Group 1 bracket, and Mike Kinney, kind of similar to what we were just talking about in North 1 Group 1, with Butler being the heavy favorites at the top seed in the bracket. Same thing could be said about Cedar Grove, a team that I was really impressed by earlier this season in their victory against Caldwell. Are they going to have a cakewalk through this bracket, or do you see another potential team that can spoil what so far has been a perfect season for the Panthers?
Yeah, Dan, Cedar Grove is playing so well right now, and they haven't really had any hiccups. They've really shown that they can take care of business both sides of the ball. You've got a dynamic quarterback in Stephen Paradiso, who starter for the last 3 years, plays like a kid who's been starting for 5 years, and he's just putting up tremendous numbers with some great people around him. Jackson Maurice is one of those receivers. He's got 2,000 yards receiving. Paradiso has 4,000 yards passing for his career. And there's so many other pieces around them. At the same time, there are some teams that are playing well in this section. So Cedar Grove's too smart and too experienced to know that they're not going to run away with this without a fight. And a couple of those teams are right behind them, I think, in New Providence, sitting at number 2, and probably Hasbrouck Heights. Now, Verona is the number 4 seed, and Cedar Grove took care of them easily, 41-0. And I see Verona, if they were to play Cedar Grove again, a better game. But I still think Cedar Grove just has more components, has more depth than Verona has. But New Providence is sort of a dangerous team. TJ Munn at quarterback, he's a kid who's really versatile, can run the football, can pass the football. AJ Whitehead is only a sophomore, but the last couple of weeks he's been really showing that he can kind of help control the run game with them. And he's also an excellent defensive player. James Keneally's another kid who is a big target for TJ Munn when he throws downfield, but also a big part of the defense. With he and Mike Petsis and Whitehead defensively, they make a really good linebacker core. So the way New Providence is playing right now, and they're well coached, they could give Cedar Grove trouble. And I know Ryan likes Hasbrouck Heights. They're 6-2, and he likes the way that Michael Napolitano and Eddie Suri are running the ball for them. And obviously, running game is what you want to have to be your strength at this time of year when you're playing in the playoffs and it's getting a little colder, and you need to control the clock. You need to quell the strong parts of your opponent. Well, Hasbrouck Heights seems to have those pieces in place, and New Providence, same thing. So could they give Cedar Grove trouble? Yeah, if you take a lead and you're able to do that, and you're forcing Paradiso to throw out of necessity rather than within the realm of the offense, that could be trouble for somebody like Cedar Grove. However, I go into this thinking Cedar Grove is definitely the favorite to come away and win this section.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to getting the football kicked off this weekend and start the playoffs in the state of New Jersey in the North 1 and North 2 groups in all these different sections, and going from groups 1 through 5. We will kick things off. And again, as a reminder, I will be at the Northern Highlands Westfield game. That's going to be in North 2 Group 4 for our playoff broadcast coverage here at NJ.com. You can watch that game live or on demand as an NJ.com subscriber by going to NJ.com/watch. And from the opening kickoff to the end of the season, NJ.com's award-winning staff of reporters and photojournalists put you in the middle of the action for in-depth coverage of all these playoff games around New Jersey, including photo galleries, recaps, and stats. Visit NJ.com/HSSports. So I'd like to thank Luis Torres, Ryan Patti, and Mike Kinney for joining us in our playoff preview of everything that's happening in the northern brackets. I'd like to thank Brian Dekine for his exceptional work as our engineer. I'm Dan Long saying so long for another weekend here of the Jersey Blitz, NJ.com's high school football podcast. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.